Hey, aloha guys, Eric West here, HawaiiRealEstate.org. If you're new to the channel, I'm all about teaching you everything you need to know about Hawaii and its real estate, but you just can't find the listing. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet, and don't forget to come back for your Maui fix, which is unicorns, butterflies, rainbows, and all the beauty of Hawaii coming to you on a very regular basis. But in this video, we're going to be talking about if you're thinking about selling your home, your land, or your condo here in the state of Hawaii. These are my top tips to make sure that you don't just get the highest sales price, right, but you also get the best buyer and you end up going to the closing table successfully with no liability. Very, very important. So this is going to be a fairly in-depth video just because I'm one of those guys, I believe in the details, right? It's all in the details, and so to skim over with a quick 2-minute video would be maybe better for YouTube analytics, but certainly not going to give you the data that you need to help you be successful. So this video is designed for anybody that's looking to possibly maybe even sell it themselves. Maybe you don't want to go through a professional listing agent like myself and you just want to do a FSBO. That's fine. These tips will definitely help you. Or maybe you've hired an agent, you're already on the market and you're wondering why your property hasn't sold yet or what's going on. This would be a great checklist to sort of run through to see if the agent that you selected to sell your property is doing all the best practices, because in my opinion these are definitely the best practices that will help get your property sold professionally and will basically, you'll avoid a lot of the pitfalls that people sometimes do when they rush a property into the market. And the best way I like to kind of frame that is you never want to have a property that's half-baked hit the market. You want to make sure you follow all these steps and it'll definitely pay off in terms of successful sale at the highest price. So the number one thing I believe to do is to find out specifically what are the things that can create problems down the road, right? I really believe in the concept of begin with the end in mind. So the first thing I recommend you do is get a professional home inspection for your property. And the reason for that is because the number one reason properties fall out of escrow, right? You might get it under contract really quick, but the number one reason properties fall out of escrow is because there's something that comes up in the inspection that wasn't anticipated, and all of a sudden the buyer gets upset or they try to renegotiate the price. It's a new discovery that basically derails the entire transaction. So the best way to avoid that is to get your own home inspection done right away. And that way you'll know all of the issues that are coming up. You can disclose those if you don't want to fix them, or you can use that as an opportunity, as a punch list to go through and fix some of your deferred maintenance items and certainly discover if there's any major problems or deal killers, and you can deal with that, if you will, up front versus waiting until the buyer gets their inspection. It really is important to know ahead of time what you're going to be dealing with in the future. So that's my number one tip, and that goes for pretty much everything but land. Land typically doesn't require an inspection, but certainly a condo or a home would definitely require that inspection. And it goes right along with the inspection is get that handyman in there to take care of some of those repair items that came up, some of that deferred maintenance. Here in Hawaii, obviously a lot of people are absentee owners. It's a second home or it's a vacation rental condo, and that is definitely something that I would suggest getting a good handyman. If you need a good referral to one here on Maui, I can definitely let you know, but certainly that's part of the services that we provide as listing agents, is to have our handyman come in and take care of some of those items, so it's definitely off of your to-do list and it just gets handled right away. The next thing is pricing. You would think that pricing would be the first thing, but it really isn't, because the inspection really drives the pricing sometimes. If it needs a roof, if it needs some kind of major pool rework or some type of a major inspection issue, you need to work that into the pricing up ahead of time. But the next step is really choosing the right price. And this is the number one area where I see most sellers and a lot of listing agents miss it, because a listing agent, quite frankly, is just going to want to, and many times just going to get the listing. So if you are pricing it in such a way that makes the listing agent uncomfortable, a lot of times they won't tell you that because they just want that listing so bad. They're not always willing to give you the truth about where the property should be priced. In a market where we're in currently, which is considered a rising market, it is important to be a little bit aggressive. Don't get me wrong. You definitely want to make sure you're not leaving any money on the table, but the pitfall here is a lot of sellers, a lot of listing agents, they overshoot. All of a sudden they're trying to get an extra 20-30% over what the property is worth, and that just very, very rarely works. You'll end up having to do major price reductions, and a lot of your best buyers are just not going to look at the property because they feel like you're just fishing, you're just way out of the market. And it's a very well-known fact that the moment your property hits the market, your absolute best buyer is the first one that's going to take a look at it, the first one that's going to call, that is a ready, willing, and able buyer that's in the market. They're waiting for a property just like yours to hit the market, and that's your best chance. So if your listing isn't ready, or if you've overpriced it, a lot of times you're going to miss the most highest probable sale, which is that first few showings that you're going to get. I want to make it very, very clear. Do not put out a half-baked listing, and I'll show you more of the other things that need to get baked into the listing before you put it on the market. Make sure you have that pre-inspection done, and make sure you nail your pricing. And the best way to know your pricing, by the way, is to look at all the comparable sales in the neighborhood, in that condominium complex, or in that land area within the last 6 months. But certainly don't forget to look at anything that's currently pending under contract and anything else that's currently on the market as competing listings. All those things factor in to your pricing. It's very important to do a very detailed analysis, and you have to look at all of the add-ons and deductions. So if you're trying to compare apples to apples, it's very difficult in real estate, and that's why it's really helpful to have a professional that can look at the different comparable sales and make sure that you're adding and deducting the right amounts of value based on how your property compares to that other one that just sold or that other one that's on the market right next door. Very, very important process. And then, again, all of this information, the details are very, very important to make sure that you nail that pricing. In a rising market, yes, you can be aggressive, but don't shoot for the moon, because a lot of times the rocket's just going to crash. The next most important thing: photography, videography, and 3D virtual tour. Critical aspect of the listing presentation. And the reason I say that is because the first impression of that property, whether someone's going to come take a look at it or has an interest, is literally going to be on that main photo that they look at. There's something about that main photo that's going to draw them in, that's going to get them excited. It's going to say a lot about the property. It's going to say a lot about the professionalism of the company that you've chosen, the agent that you're working with. But you definitely do not want to skimp when it comes to photography, and I would highly encourage you to take advantage of things like sunset and sunrise times of day. Aerial photography is very, very important because it shows a perspective of the property that you just can't get from the ground. And also doing a nice 3D Matterport tour. Matterport's the name of the company that has the best 3D service, but basically that's where they can kind of walk through the whole property on their iPhone or any device really and kind of see the layout and do measurements. And then the final thing would be a video. Video is definitely one of the most powerful ways to present a property online, and honestly most listing agents that I see are not really tuned in to the way to properly market those videos on YouTube, to title them properly, and just to not have annoying music, honestly. So take a hard look at the videos that your potential listing agent has done in the past, and see, is it something that you would watch, or is it just the same old boring cookie cutter video that nobody really watches and doesn't really sell the property. Video, in my opinion, is the #1 opportunity to really convey what the property has to offer, and to do it in a very personal and powerful way, and to keyword those videos so that they get found in search both on YouTube and on Google. The next tip for you guys is documentation. And what do I mean by that? Most people I've found that are purchasing real estate, certainly in Hawaii, certainly high-end real estate, are fairly very knowledgeable consumers, fairly analytical by nature, and they got a lot of questions. And so the distance and time between when they discover the property and when they decide to make an offer and go under contract is really determined by how much information that they can gather that makes them feel comfortable with that. And so the more information that you can gather up front as the homeowner, because a lot of that information is in your hands, is very important, and to have that presented in a succinct PDF. And I tell other realtors all the time, man, put it inside the MLS under Associated Docs so we don't have to call and request this information. But a real quick sort of Cliff Notes version of what that documentation looks like would be things like prior bills, electrical bills, water bills, landscaping information, tax bills, the rental history if it's a rental property, all the vacation rental management information, having everything condensed and going through a Q&A with your listing agent, answering as many detailed questions as you can about the property, and then putting that into one document, literally one document that you can put inside the MLS. You can have it in associated documents so people can just click on it and read it. It's all there. Saves so much back and forth and so much time and energy. And it also is a important liability saver for you, because in real estate, the number one rule is this: disclose, disclose, disclose. So you can literally save yourself a lawsuit if you simply disclose everything that you know about the property, and then later on down the road, you don't have any liability because you presented that information. And doing that early on in the transaction while they're still looking at the property, in my opinion, is the best way to do it, because they get their answers, they get their questions answered. They're either interested or they're not, and if they are interested, they're going to move forward with the deal. But to have to go back and forth getting that information, and it's just a very inefficient process. Do all of your work up front, and that way your buyer can do all of their due diligence up front, and all that information is just shipped out in one single PDF, and the vast majority of that due diligence and those questions are answered at the very beginning of the process. The next topic is preparation of the property for your first showing. Now, you could say your first showing is really the photography session. When the photographer comes over, the drone operator, the videographer, that it really is your first showing. So consider that the date that you want to have all of this completed by. And what do I mean by all of this? The most important thing is the cleanliness of the property, and to have it as decluttered as you possibly can. A lot of homes here in Hawaii are second homes, so they're sort of staged, ready to go. They're vacation rentals, so you don't have a lot of that to do. But certainly if you live in the property, or if a tenant lives in the property, decluttering that as much as you possibly can, doing as much professional cleaning as you can, cleaning the windows so that the photography looks good, because windows can show glare and dust, and we certainly have some of that flying around in the air sometimes here in Hawaii. So preparing the property for your first showing, which is your photography, is super important. And then also listen to feedback that you get from your listing agent. If they tell you things like, hey, or they should be telling you things like, hey, I'm smelling an odor here, or I'm seeing some deferred cleaning or maintenance in this area, listen to what they have to say. If they have an opinion about maybe the better way to stage or move some furniture or declutter, listen to those suggestions. Don't get offended by them. They're trying to help you. And if they're not giving you those suggestions, then definitely ask for that feedback. Now, a lot of times we'll bring in interior designers, we'll bring in stagers, we will get the opinion of other professionals that do this for a living to really make sure that we don't miss anything, because literally once that property goes live on the internet and you start having showings, that is like showtime. And so everything that you've done up to that point in time to prepare the property should be making it as nice as possible, as presentable as possible, and certainly cleanliness, I think, ranks super high up on that list. So hiring a professional cleaner to come in and do that work, I think, is very important. Another important step is to get the preliminary title search run by the escrow company ahead of time. Sometimes there's some lingering title issues. There could be a cloud on title. There could be something out there that you're not aware of. It's very important to order that preliminary title report ahead of time, and then also create that relationship with the escrow company ahead of time, so that by the time you go into escrow, you already have that relationship started, and having that preliminary title report, you've read it already, and you know if there's any issues that are to come up. Again, part of doing your due diligence ahead of time and having that document ready in case a prospective buyer wants to take a look at it. Some additional inspections to consider having done ahead of time: if you have a pool, have that pool inspected ahead of time. Be aware of issues. I know a lot of times pools just kind of things go unnoticed sometimes. Talk to whoever takes care of your pool. Maybe they'll give you a good deal on an inspection, but definitely don't wait till the last minute to have that pool looked at. The next one would be irrigation. Irrigation systems are very prone to leaks and having issues. If you have a company that's currently taking care of your landscaping, maybe ask them to come in and do an inspection to look at everything, make sure it's working properly. You won't believe how many transactions I've seen at the last minute. All of a sudden we start talking about landscape irrigation issues when that should have been taken care of from the very beginning. So really encourage you to have these additional inspections done. Another inspection you're going to want to consider to get is a cesspool or a septic system inspection. Very important, because eventually they're going to look at it, so you should look at it now. If you get it pumped, that's always a great idea. Sometimes if there's work to be done, you want to wait on the pump until they're going to do that work, because they need the tank to be empty. But make sure you find out exactly what's going on with your cesspool or your septic system. And then the final inspection would be the survey. If you have an existing survey, make sure you dig that up and provide it. I wouldn't necessarily get the survey done ahead of time, because that's something you're going to want to do during escrow. But definitely find out your existing survey and see if there's any issues that you see on that survey. And certainly get ready to hopefully hire that same surveyor so you can maybe save a little bit of money. But the survey is definitely one of those things that should be done on every single home transaction. It usually is here on Maui, so get ready because the survey is coming your way for sure. The next inspection to consider is a termite inspection. Now this will happen in the due process of the transaction. So once you go under contract, there is one of the last contingencies is to have termite inspection done. But to have one done ahead of time I think is really important, because that way you know what's coming ahead, and also if there are termite issues that you can take care of those now. You can have your home fumigated and tented, and that sort of takes care of that issue, or you can do some spot treatment. But as I tell my clients all the time, every house in Hawaii either had termites, has termites, or is about to have termites. So this is definitely something that's going to come up, and you should be tenting your home every 5 years. If you haven't been, maybe now is a good time to go out and get that service contract so that the next owner has got a company to turn to and they've already inspected it. But taking care of your termite issue ahead of time is very important. If your buyer is getting a loan, many times it will require the termite inspection report a few weeks before closing. Has to be certified. So definitely deal with the termite issue ahead of time. Don't wait until you're under contract and then all of a sudden something comes up and bites you. Let's talk a little bit about showings. So the moment your property hits the market, there's a very good chance you're going to get your buyer that wants to see the property very soon. Usually that buyer, like I said, is ready, willing, and able. They're in the market, they're waiting in the wings, and boom, here comes your listing, and they're going to call their buyer's agent or call the listing agent and want to go look at it. So you'd be surprised how many people, how many other listing agents I see do this. They activate the listing on, say, a Monday, and there was just a check-in that day for the next 2 weeks. Say it's a condo, or there's a tenant in the property and they haven't given them the 48-hour notice yet to let them know that we're going to be doing showings. So it's almost like you advertise a product for sale and then the store is closed. That'd be crazy, right? So make sure you coordinate the first day that it hits the market that you're ready, able, and willing to do a showing, and maybe time that when there's a vacancy in the vacation rental schedule. Time it so that your tenants know, hey, for the next 2 or 3 days we're going to be doing showings from this time to this time. They already have their 48 hours notice. And certainly if you're in the property, just be ready, because you want to make sure that you can accommodate all showings. Certainly with a vacation rental condo that can be very difficult, but I encourage you to think about out of the box. If there are vacationers in the unit, maybe ahead of time you can disclose to them that the property will be on the market. There's a chance that we might have to do a showing. If we do, we're willing to give you a $25 gift certificate for lunch. But I find many listing agents are not working hard enough to get buyers into these vacation rental condos when there's vacationers in there. And I think it's one of those things that with some creativity, most people on vacation leave during the day. They go out on excursions or out on the beach. So to make that a possibility, I think is definitely worth trying. But at a very minimum, time your listing when it goes active, that those first few days, it's already pre-planned that you're going to have people coming in, and you've already made arrangements that the home or the condo is ready to look at. If it's a second home, a significant second home with belongings, valuables in there, make sure that all of your showings are obviously attended by the listing agent. I actually put up a Ring security camera so that I can see everyone that's coming and going. Just need to have an active wireless internet connection in the home to do that, but that's a great way that you can see exactly who's coming and who's going. And also if it's a nice home, even having some blue booties that are available. Not everyone likes to take off their shoes, so if they want to keep their shoes on, you got some blue booties that are available. So having some of these protocols set in place, and if you really want to go to the next level, make it so that there's some drinks and refreshments that are available. Sometimes when your buyers show up, this could be the last home or condo on their tour. They could be a little tired. They could be a little bit thirsty. Their buyer's agent might not be a good buyer's agent. Might not have drinks and refreshments and snacks in the car, so their blood sugar is low and they're dehydrated. They come into the showing. You've got some snacks and refreshments. Can make all the difference. I've got one of my favorite rules of thumb is don't ever let buyers' blood sugars get low, because when they do, they get kind of grumpy and they don't want to look at real estate, and they certainly don't want to buy anything. They just want to go eat. But there's a very tight schedule usually on showings, and so sometimes you can't break away to go get that much needed nutrition and hydration. So having that available at your showing can be super helpful. My next tip is about getting yourself personally prepared as a seller. There's definitely some financial implications of what you're doing. It's important to know those financial implications ahead of time, not a week before closing. So I personally All my clients get 1 hour CPA consultation, because it's very important to talk to a CPA to see what are the tax consequences. The rules are always changing. I also have a 1031 specialist that I will put my sellers in touch with in case they're doing a 1031, to make all those preparations ahead of time. And then the final one, when it comes to finances, is to be aware, if you're a seller, that there is a withholding in Hawaii. But be aware that there is a withholding if you are not a Hawaii-based individual, or your LLC is not a Hawaii-based entity, that there will be a holding for that domestically. And if you're an international seller, there's an additional holding if you're not in this country. So be keenly aware of what those numbers are and the tax implications of that ahead of time, so that you don't get that bad news, you know, a week before closing. You're like, what? They're going to withhold what? How much? Definitely know that ahead of time. And that's one of the reasons I encourage people to talk to a CPA, so you can understand exactly how those rules affect you. If you're a buyer, be aware that you are also signing a document that says you are the one responsible for this withholding, which has some implications as well. So understanding that, talking to a CPA. And then the final thing would be an attorney. Some transactions can be very complex, and a lot of people just feel much more comfortable speaking with an attorney, especially if something complicated does come up in the course of the transaction. And having a referral to good attorneys that know the Hawaii real estate market and all the ins and outs, the rules and regulations, is very, very important. So doing some of these consultations ahead of time can definitely take the pressure off once you're under contract. Marketing, which I think is kind of funny, because that usually is what most listing agents talk about first. Hey, this is how we can market your property. This is what we, and yeah, that's important. But guess what? If you don't do all of this prep work ahead of time, if you don't have all your ducks in a row, all the best marketing in the world is just going to attract somebody that, and you're not quite ready for prime time, or the listing is half baked and now all of a sudden you're not going to get to closing because you jumped the gun, so to speak. But don't get me wrong, marketing is incredibly important, and one of the reasons why you hire certain listing agents to market your property, because not everyone does the same job when it comes to marketing. Sure, everybody puts it in the MLS, and don't get me wrong, the MLS is a huge component of making sure your property gets out there to a lot of the you know, the IDX feeds, Zillow, Redfin, all those different websites. But there's many nuances to marketing to make sure that the property gets massive exposure and also is marketed in such a way that shows it in its best light. A lot of properties don't sell just because the angle of attack was just a little bit off and the consumer didn't quite vibe, or there's a missing detail, or there's a detail that everyone is seeing but it's being missed by the listing agent, by yourself, the seller. To market a property, I think it goes back to, number one, the photography, the videography, the way that is presented. That is your number one. That is the face of the property. Number two would be the write-up. Having a write-up that definitely gets to the point. There's not too many superlatives. There's not too much exaggeration, but it definitely hits on what makes that property unique. Every single property on earth has a unique selling proposition, and so there's actually a way that you can go and sort of harvest all of the unique selling propositions that have been utilized in a certain area or a certain condominium. Make sure you're hitting on all the points, right? There's every property has got so many unique selling propositions, and say it's like a 12-cylinder engine. You want to make sure each one of those cylinders is firing and you're not forgetting any of those data points. And so having that write-up as a collaborative effort, I think, is super important. Obviously, it's the job of the listing agent to write up, but sharing that with the sellers, getting feedback, going through and just getting different opinions, making sure there's no, grammatical errors or sentence structure errors, things of that nature says a lot. But making sure you're hitting every cylinder of the unique selling proposition, because consumers are incredibly informed these days and they read everything. And so this is a huge opportunity to tell them things about that property that they might not ever learn any other way. This is your one chance. So I see a lot of listing agents that, maybe they've just been embedded in the market too long, they're too spoiled with too many listings, and they just kind of put the same 3 sentences down. It's like, really? And they almost copy and paste from previous listings that they've had. It's like, no, everything should be your best attempt at a Pulitzer Prize winning, write-up as a real estate agent. And as the seller, your job is to critique that and to give them feedback. And one of the favorite questions I like to ask sellers is like, why did you buy the property? What was it about the property that drew you to it? Why is it that you bought this? And sometimes the answer to that question is the kernel of the theme that's going to help sell it to the next person. My next favorite thing to do on the marketing side is actually to create create a standalone website for the property, and also to create a unique URL for that particular website. So for example, say you're selling 123 Ho'ole Street, then the web address will be www.123ho'ole.com. So it makes it super easy for people to find the information, and then also you can put that on your sign writer, you can also put that on brochures, you can have that. The other thing about the standalone website, the standalone website contains all of the information that we did during the due diligence process. So it has associated documents, it has all the rental history, it has the Matterport 3D built into it, has the videos, the aerial shots, all the photos obviously of the property, a write-up of the property is in there, a maps feature is in there. Everything that pertains to that property is in one spot, and it has its own unique URL, which is either the name of the condo or the street address of the property, or if it's a piece of land without an address, you can put the name of the land if you name it something. But it's a really cool marketing tool, but it also makes a lot of sense. And so if people want more information, it's really easy for them to remember, hey, just put in 123ho'olestreet.com and everything's right there. So if your agent isn't doing that, I would highly encourage you to ask them to do that and have all that information organized in one spot. Because as I mentioned before, a lot of the buyers, especially here in Hawaii, they're high-end, they're highly organized, they're analytical, they're smart, and to have everything organized in one place so they can get all their questions answered just makes things 100% quicker and also protects your liability. Things that you can do to help really set a fire out there in the field in terms of people noticing. Like, you've ever noticed if a field sets fire here on Maui, like everyone notices, right? There's a plume of smoke, there's like emergency fire trucks going, and everyone, the traffic backs up. Now of course we can't create that kind of a fuss with a listing, but that should be our goal. How do we create a fire in the field? And a couple ways that you can do that. Number one, you can do email blasts. So me, for example, I've got a database of 10,000 buyers that have inquired on property over the last 10 years. It's a lot of people. I send out a mass email campaign announcing the listing. Number two, another email blast that you can do is to every real estate agent that's inside the MLS system. All of a sudden it pops up, and they don't consider that junk email. They really don't. Listing agents, buyers agents, because I've done a lot of buyer side transactions, I love those emails because it helps me be more aware of what's coming on the market. It's a proactive way, because a lot of buyers agents, they're very reactive. So to have that email go out to every buyer's agent, I think is super, super important. And the next thing is you can either do broker open houses or regular consumer open houses, but making your property, your home or your condo open to the general public is really helpful sometimes if it's possible. And then the other one is have a broker open where brokers can come. Tip I have for you is just listed postcards. Now, this is super old school strategy, right? They were doing this back in the 60s and 70s. But doesn't it make sense that you would notify everyone that already owns a home or a condo in that particular complex, let them know that there's a new property that just hit the market, because there's a good chance they have a friend or a family member that might be interested, or they just run in the type of circles that can afford that kind of a property. And yet the side added benefit of making that existing homeowner aware of the fact that you are a real estate agent listing property in their complex, and next time they may call you for the listing because they see you're taking that extra step of sending out the just listed postcards. For getting your property listed, sold at the highest price, and you actually make it to the closing table and you're successfully closing, is social media. Social media is literally the most game-changing platforms for selling real estate. The reason I say that is because if you know what you're doing, you can demographically target the property that you're selling, not just to people that can afford it, but also people that are in the area at the moment, people that exist, that already have purchased something in the area or already own a home. You can literally demographically target people, and this counts for obviously Facebook and Instagram, which are owned by the same company, YouTube and Google search. YouTube owns Google, so that goes hand in hand. And then the final one would be things like LinkedIn and other social networking platforms that basically you can sort of reverse engineer and get in there and make something aware, and literally sometimes putting a real estate ad, or not really an ad, but having information, if you will, that piques their interest that doesn't normally belong on a certain platform can really jump out. I do a lot of videos on LinkedIn, for example, and LinkedIn is a very professional type social platform, but I'll literally put things on there about Maui and things to do and different properties. And so don't always do things right inside the box. Think outside the box a little bit, but definitely take advantage of all the algorithms, the AI, and the different marketing things that you can do on these social media platforms. I'll give you an example. I've got my social media platform, Facebook, set up so, and Instagram, that the moment anybody lands on the island, right, a visitor, it's going to pop up on their scroll. So that's pretty cool that they have the geo-targeting aspect available. And because, you know, sometimes all the local people are great. Obviously there's ways to approach them, but I want to make sure I target every person that lands on the island when they get here. And a lot of them are scrolling their Facebook and their Instagram. It's a great way to get exposure. And the other nice thing is the cost for advertising something like that is very, very low compared to traditional advertising like print. And my final tip has to do with paperwork. Man, let me tell you what, there's a lot of paperwork for real estate in Hawaii. And the good news is if you're working with a great agent, which I'm sure you are, I would definitely make sure that they have got a full-time individual to handle all the paperwork. In Hawaii, we call that a transaction coordinator, but there's a lot of paperwork that needs to be done throughout the process, and you want to make sure it all gets done professionally and on time, and having a transaction coordinator on the team is absolutely essential. Well, thanks so much for watching the video, guys. I super appreciate it. If you found it helpful in any way, shape, or form, I love a thumbs up, a shaka, a share, a subscribe, and certainly if you're ever in the market to sell your home, condo, or land here in Hawaii, I'd love to be your guy.